let's talk fertilizer, and then I think it's irrigation, and then we're pruning. Okay, so fertilizer, we're applying it late winter, early spring. So right now is a great time to put fertilizer on your fruit trees if you haven't done so, especially if we've got a rainstorm or a snowstorm that's going to move it into the soil. Okay, I like a granular product. A lot of people say, hey, can I put tree stakes in or the spikes in the ground? And yeah, you can. But what happens if I put 4 of them in and I put one there, one here, and one right there? Where did I fertilize? Right there. What about the roots over here that affect the fruit on this branch? And the roots there that affect this one? And so with a granular product, I can spread it clear around the whole area. The drip line. Now, where's the drip line of the tree? Right here, you know, if this is my branch coming down, it's right there. So I'm just going to put that fertilizer. I don't want to dump the fertilizer right here at the base of the trunk. It needs to be out in the drip line. That's where the roots are at. That's where it's going to take that up and utilize it from. Okay. Apply 1 ounce of actual nitrogen per year age of the tree. Actual nitrogen. What's that? Okay, remember back to that soils and fertilizer class? Okay, we talked about, so in my example, I've got a 6-year-old peach tree. So if it's 6 years old, I'm going to put on 6 ounces of actual nitrogen. I go to the store, I get something that's 3400 on the fertilizer bag. 34 will go into 100 how many times? 3. So 3 times 6 is 18 ounces of that product on a 6-year-old tree. Okay, well, I go to the store and I buy something 2100. 21 will go into 100 5 times. 5 times 6 is 30. I buy 20, 20, 20. 16, 16, 16. Okay, it's just a simple math problem. Okay, now, the first year I put my tree in this spring, I don't like to put any fertilizer on it at all, especially nitrogen. Nitrogen causes what growth on a tree?
Lush green growth.
Lush green growth. So it's top growth. I don't want that, growth up here. I want root development. And typically we have plenty of phosphorus, plenty of potassium. If you just feel like you've got to put something on that tree, root stimulator, something like that's fine. But stay away from the nitrogen the first year. Okay. Never going to exceed more than 8 ounces. Another thing about it is some of you may look at it and say, okay, you know what? Gosh, every year on my tree I'm getting this much growth that I'm having to prune out. Back off on the nitrogen. Put half the amount on that you typically do. If I get this much growth, good fruit, okay, maybe I back off a little bit more. Maybe I cut it down too much and I'm only getting this much growth and my fruit's this big and I thin it good. What do? Add more. Okay? So sometimes it's a trial and error type thing until where you finally figure it out. Now, if I've got a little dwarf tree or one of those columnar apple trees, am I going to be putting on 8 ounces of nitrogen? No. Okay? So it's a balancing act there with it. Okay? These are just kind of some guidelines for you. Questions about fertilizer? Yes?
So would you fertilize with an all-purpose or just nitrogen?
The other thing is, if you're putting in, maybe 6 trees, a dozen trees, and you don't know what your soil has in it, take a fertilizer test. That's going to tell you, give you a good baseline, and then from there, you might just put on the nitrogen, and every 3 or 4 years, you might take a soil test again. Okay?
When you put it around the drip line, do you mix it in at all, or do you just look at
If remember I said that I would like to put it around if I've got a rainstorm event, then it will move it down in. If I put it on and it didn't rain, then yeah, you can stir it in or water it. Okay? So it doesn't volatilize. Yeah, you don't want to put it out and have it volatilize, okay? Okay. Yes.
When they talk about the age of trees, the age of your tree, is that from planting? I mean, because what if you get like a 5-year-old tree and then you plant it? Do you count
Well,
it as
most of those
5-year-old?
trees, okay, most of the trees when we're picking them up at the nursery, they're going to be, probably most of those are going to be a 2nd year going on a 3rd year leaf. Okay? Yeah, I would say most of them are going to be that. And so, again, you don't want to dump 3 years worth of nitrogen on that. And so when I count, I'm saying that first year you put it in the ground is year 1. Yeah. And I'm not putting anything in, so it'd be the following year would be year 2, and that's when I'm putting on that 2 ounces. Okay.
Do you have a recommended ground cover to have around the orchard area?
Ground cover?
Yeah, I saw somebody have like grass. I mean, weeds ideally probably isn't the best thing to leave there. Or what do you?
I don't mind just bare ground with some mulch and that.
So do you just keep the weeds down? Is that what
I do.
you
Yep, I do. Like in the demonstration orchard that I have grass in there, I will irrigate that orchard for my trees. And so sometimes you might come and you might see that grass, because I have to have the walkways for the public to get onto and their feet don't get muddy. You might see that grass is stressed. Okay.
Would you ever grow like red clover or something like that that's supposed to put natural nitrogen down?
USU is doing some research with that, and you kind of have to be careful with some of that, because again, if you're putting a lot of that in there, sometimes they're finding that if it's too close to the tree, it's competing with that tree for water, for nutrients and other things. And so they're doing some research, and hopefully here in the next couple of years we'll have some good recommendations as far as some of those things, because you like some of the stuff they've tried has been like alyssum, the flower alyssum, to encourage native bees and other things in there that would benefit the things. And so they're kind of, we don't have any good recommendations yet for that. Okay. Irrigation on trees that are established spring and fall time of the year, about twice a month. Now this depends upon your soil type. If you got a sandier soil, it might be a little more frequently. If you've got heavy clay soils, it might be less frequently. Just these are some guidelines for you. Young trees, probably no closer than about once a week. And I see more dead fruit trees from homeowners that overwater than anything. Like I said, that surface starts to dry up just a little bit, and they're out there with that garden hose every day, for hours, just watering those trees. For example, peaches and nectarines, they don't like wet feet. They don't like wet, root systems. And they need to dry out a little bit. And if we're not letting them dry out, they're going to rot, and you'll be replacing the trees more frequently than you'd like to. Okay?
Can you define young and established? When do you reach that point of?
I'm saying about 2 to 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
From when you put them in?
Yep. Okay. Again, we're putting the water where the drip line is at, and I'm putting the irrigation. I'm irrigating deep. So if I've got trees that are sitting in my turf, how deep am I putting irrigation down 18 to 24 inches deep on my turf? No. How deep do I usually irrigate turf? Yeah, 6 to 8 inches if I'm lucky. So if I've got fruit trees in my turf area, I need to give them some good deep irrigations to encourage those roots to go down to where the water's at. Otherwise, my trees are going to be shallow rooted, and I get a fruit load and a wind, and trees are going to come over, okay? We already talked kind of about the crown rot there. You're seeing a lot of commercial growers now that are using drip tape tube, and what they will do is they will put those fairly close right here, and for the life of those trees they will just drip right there. They won't move that out. And so instead of your roots being in a circular pattern like your tree is, those roots will be more in line with the drip tubing and not far out. But we're talking, they've got hundreds of acres of trees to take care of, so that's the way they do it.
So if you have a drip line to each tree, would it be best to move it around?
It depends. Like I said, if it's a young tree, you can train those roots and keep it there. But if it's a more mature tree, yeah, you're probably going to have to move it around, or create some of the tube, put a loop or something out around there and gradually move that out as the tree grows. Yeah. Okay. Questions about irrigation? Yeah, we'll skip that right there. Okay. So now we get into the pruning just a little bit. So why in the world do we prune our trees? What does pruning do? Okay, high quality fruit, provide maximum sunlight. Remember, we're keeping those trees, nice and flat. We make, on a peach tree, we're going to grow new wood. We're going to maintain our spurs on our apples and pears. Can we, if that tree's a sweet cherry tree that's 40 feet, are we going to be able to keep it 10 by 10? No. Okay. So but we can, kind of take the top out of the tree and keep it fairly flat. Annual pruning reduces that pruning that you do every 5-10 years and that on the tree, and we haul out truckloads of things on it. Yes?
When should you prune your peach trees?
Late winter, early spring. Okay, typically right now is when we want to start thinking about it. But remember, pruning also stimulates that tree to break dormancy and start to grow. So I get the question all the time, you know what, it's Thanksgiving time, the kids are coming home, I've got some young guys that can help me prune my trees. Should I be pruning on my trees in November? Okay, why wouldn't we want to prune on those trees at that time? Right, remember that tree, we want it to accumulate. No, not accumulate. Oh, slipped my mind. We want to go dormant, okay? And if we're out there pruning on that tree, and it's not going to harden off, not the term either. Acclimate. Okay? We want that tree to get acclimated before it turns off really cold weather. About 5 years ago, we saw Thanksgiving time. It was really nice weather, and then all of a sudden we dropped to -degree temperatures, and those trees weren't hardened off, and we saw a lot of winter injury to them. So typically pruning late winter, early spring. Now, if I've got an apricot tree and it's about ready to bud, do I want to go out and prune on it? No, I want to put that off as much as possible so that I don't stimulate it to, say, start growing. How late can I prune? If you've got half a dozen trees, it's not going to take you a long time to prune. I've seen growers that are pruning trees when they're in full bloom. Are they doing that every year? No, but I can guarantee you this year they'll probably be doing some of that because the trees are just breaking dormancy so quick on them, and they've got couple of hundred acres of it. You'll probably see the same thing down here happen, that they'll be pruning those trees when they're in full bloom. Okay, and nothing else there. Okay, remember I told you about that gorgeous looking fruit tree? This is it. Notice there it is right there. Remember we made that cut when we first put it in. We're starting to develop those angles out. They made a heading cut, cut it. And now all I've got, here's my prunings off of that tree. Okay? Here's enough wood right there for this year's fruit production. All of that fruit is about right here to about right there. Okay?
Do you want to prune nut trees the same way?
Mike will tell you how to prune a nut tree. I don't know. I don't do much with nuts. Okay? So, what did that tree look like before I pruned it? Right there. Okay? This is from right here, that is all last year's growth. And I don't need that, because if I don't prune this tree this year and remove that, where's the wood next year? Now it's up here, and the next year up here. And so annual pruning helps me keep that tree to the kind of the size that I want, which is here to here. Okay?
Is that why when you drive through the California Delta, it looks like they mowed the...
Yeah, you could. Yep. You can come up ours, and it looks like they've just taken a helicopter and just but it's all done with machines, hands that have done that. So they prune it, and that's what it looks like. Okay, that's one way of doing it. That's an open vase, open center. Go to the classes, learn how to do it.
This is a peach, so it's going to get peaches on this year, last year's wood, right? The apple's 2 years, so you don't...
At least 2 years, yep. So apple's a little bit different. Like I said, go to the classes. I kind of want to show you. Pick a system, learn how to do it, prune every year. Prune every year. Prune every year. Okay? Okay, let's talk. So now, our trees are just about ready to bloom, and we're nervous. By the way, how many of you guys want to be a fruit farmer with this year? Have a couple of 100 acres of trees. Okay. Remember we talked about how those trees, we plant them on the benches. All that cold air comes through the canyon or off the mountain. It comes through the trees, and it's going to move out into the lower valley area. And the difference between the valley might be 20 degrees, or maybe that, let's just use 25 degrees, and up here might be 35 degrees. And so we've got that difference right there. Why is that important? Well, this is up in my county. This grower, the trees on the bench are over here. And so the cold air is going to come off the mountain and it comes down. The freeway is about 30 feet tall or more. And so all that cold air comes down and it hits the freeway right here and it puddles and stays right there in that orchard. Okay, he has a couple of wind machines that he has to use to circulate that air and keep fruit on those trees. Okay.
Sorry, you're going to be tired of me. Obviously the freeway is like a big, long, solid barrier, but how do buildings work? Does it flow around the building?
No, it can be the same thing. If I go back, how many of us put, a row of conifer trees? Or we have a building, or we put a privacy fence. Okay? So if you're, if you're up on the mountain a little bit, hopefully that passes through. But if you're out in the valley and we've got something like that, and that air ponds right there, it's just as bad as if we're out there, okay? So we compound that. Now, why is that so important? Okay, let's say, for example, right here, this is peaches. Let's say, our blooms, our buds are about like this right tonight. And the weatherman says, oh man, it's going to get down to 32 degrees. How much damage can I expect? Well, if I look 21 degrees for 30 minutes, I'm going to lose about 10% of my buds if they're right there at that developmental stage. They can go down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes, and I'm going to lose 90% of my buds. So I've got a difference of about 16 degrees that I can work with right there. Okay? Now let's fast forward. Say we've got fruit that's starting to develop right there. Still about 28 degrees for 30 minutes, and I'm going to get 10% kill. I'm at 25 degrees, and I lose 90% of my fruit. Okay? So I've got 3 degrees to play with to try and have fruit on my trees. Who wants to join me? Huh? Okay? Now you know why those fruit growers are just, on edge, and that. So, what can we do? Basically, if we get 10 to 15% of the blooms or buds or the fruit that survive on apples, pears, peaches, we've got a full crop. Anything more than that, we're going to have to thin. If we have about 50% of the bloom on full cherries, I've got a full crop, okay? So, oops. Could we go out on some of those semi-dwarf trees and put a blanket or a tarp over top of that? Could I put some water or wet the soil underneath it so it radiates heat? By the way, I guess, why in the world, if I'm talking about a frost or freezing, why would they go out and turn sprinklers on?
Because it's above 32 degrees.
That water, when it freezes, creates heat. Remember, if I can keep that at 32 degrees, I'm safe because, remember, I don't see damage until it gets down to 28 degrees. Okay, how many of you guys are going to go out and turn your sprinklers on? I typically don't see homeowners or recommend that as an option for homeowners, because if you put too much on, what's going to happen? You're going to break scaffolding branches and that, okay? So we could do some things like this. The Christmas lights, the bigger ones that, put it by some fruit on the tree, and hopefully it keeps it warm enough right there next to it that we could get some fruit. Floodlight with the tarp over top of it, putting some heat up into that canopy. Charcoal briquettes, I'd never heard of that until I had one of my guys up in Idaho that I taught, and he says, oh yeah, you ought to do it. Because you just have to kind of be careful you don't get too close to the branches, because you might, Okay, that's ingenious. So we could do some things like that to get fruit on our, keep it on our tree. Okay, that's just kind of what fruit looks like when it's frozen. That's what a peach looks like when it's frozen. Notice that these were those 4 pictures were taken the same morning after a frost. Notice that this one is much tighter. It withstood, almost every bud on that tree withstood those temperatures because they were tight and they weren't open. Okay, so that proved that. Okay, so now we're past. We've got fruit on our tree. You're telling me I got to thin. Why do you thin? Size, better fruit color. Okay, we have that tree that provides a lot of fruit one year and no fruit the next year. Okay, if we'll come in and thin that fruit, we'll make it so we've got that annual bearing on that tree. At least try and break it out of the cycle. You're thin it when it's pea to dime size. Okay, that fruit is, approaching golf ball size. It's put a lot of energy into all of that fruit when we could have left 3 or 4 on there and sized them up really nice. Every 6 to 8 inches. Now I don't want you taking a tape measure or a ruler out there, so just use your hand. If you can take and touch on your pinky and on your thumb, that's about the right amount of fruit spacing with your tree. That king bloom, talk about that in just a second. Typically, apples, pears, peaches, nectarines are thinned. We're not thinning cherries. Sometimes you might thin some apricots if you got a lot of them and size them up a little bit better. Okay. So here's a cluster of fruit. Remember we looked at that first bloom on the tree. Is that apple a little bit bigger? So I'm going to keep this apple, get rid of the rest of them. Okay. Stick the knife in and twist, right? Yeah, that's late. That's way too late on that. Okay? Yeah, still take them off because you'll still get some size in that to them. The other reason why you want to is because as that fruit ripens, so we have, if every one of my clusters have fruit on them, as that fruit ripens, the seed gives off a hormone that suppresses the bud formation for next year's fruit. So back to that tree that bears heavy one year and light the next. If I will thin and remove the fruit off of some of those clusters, it will make it so that the buds will form for next year's fruit in those areas where I've removed the fruit. Okay? Yeah?
Back to that picture, you circled the one. Shouldn't about half or 3/4 of those come out of that picture?
All of them but the one.
Or all but the one?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we go back to, I'm going to leave 3, no more than 4 on that whole length of that branch right there. That's tough taking off that much fruit, huh? Okay? Okay? We're a little bit too greedy, and it's amazing. As homeowners, we just, it's hard to take that fruit off, and so all of a sudden the branches break, and we get to start all over again. Okay? With that one. Typically, we're not thinning. Yeah, cherries. Okay. We've kind of touched upon this as to why you may not have, fruit on the tree. We talked kind of the pollination problem, sterile pollen, no bees. Trees. If you've got a standard tree, most of those standard trees realize they're going to take a lot longer to come into production than these dwarf and semi-dwarf trees. Okay. So if it's a standard tree, realize it's going to be a while before it comes in. Okay? Now let's get that. Apricots, they can be thinned if you need to. I doubt you're going to need to thin apricots this year. Mother Nature will do that for us, okay? Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about the insects. If you have peaches, nectarines, or apricots, you're probably going to be wanting to find out about twig borer and peach tree borer. Codling moth is what causes wormy apples and pears. Western cherry fruit fly is what causes worms in cherries, both sweet and tart. And then there's some other things like spider mites, scales, and aphids. And I'll show you some publications on those. We probably have seen this. That's codling moth damage. That's what the adult looks like. It's really only about 3/8 of an inch long. This is what the twig borer looks like, and so it actually causes wormy peaches and nectarines and apricots if it gets into there. So very similar to codling moth. This is western cherry fruit fly. The fly, a little bit bigger than, smaller than a house fly, a little bit bigger than a vinegar fly. This is what it looks like. And something that's worse than that is when you've done all the hard work and you've canned or bottled the peach or the cherries, and then those are all floating on the surface, and you got a nice white layer there. Okay. So how do you know when you need to spray or protect your fruit? That's a typical question we get asked. And the USU Extension IPM team puts together some really good publications, pest advisories that you can go out to and sign up. And this website is actually the second to the last slide on your handout. But what you can do is you can go right here and sign up and say, hey, email me the pest advisory. And so when they put that out, it comes right to your email address. You look it up, follow through, and it says, okay, codling moth this, and that, and you can do it. If you don't want to do that, you can actually go out to the website and just manually go in and find it, Fruit Tree Advisory, click on it, and then it will pull it up, and you can read through it. And you can see that this month it talked about no need to treat codling moth or twig borer after September 15th. Here's some other things to kind of be looking for, and then it has some information down below it. As you go through it, for example, this is for codling moth. It said that, for example, I apologize, Utah's county is down here lower, but if you use like here, Salt Lake, it said that in Salt Lake, the greatest period of egg hatch was this June 14th through the 28th of June. Now, people say, okay, is that when I should spray year after year? And what's my response going to be? No. Insects develop based upon high and low temperatures. And so think of where our trees are at right now. That probably is going to mean that we're going to be spraying a little bit quicker in this spring and summer. If it turns off hot and dry, that means we're going to have multiple generations, and those generations are going to be a lot quicker, a lot shorter, but we're going to have more of them. And so every year is a little bit different. So I can't say, you know what, every year for codling moth you need to spray by such and such date. So that's the value of the pest advisory, is that Extension puts out traps across the Wasatch Front, and we track the temperatures, and we can tell you pretty much close to the day as to when you should be doing some sort of spray, covering your fruit with whatever you're going to use, and I'll show you some reduced risk options here in just a second, okay? So that's the value of those. Or you can call the Extension office, and Mike will tell you, no, sometimes they can look it up, but I just encourage you to go out to the pest, sign up for the pest advisory, and it's easy to get. Pests.usu.edu. Yeah, and that's on there. If you want to know more about codling moth, there's some really good publications, 3 to 4 pages you can read up and put you to sleep at night trying to understand those. Okay, as far as insect control, doing something is better than doing nothing at all. I have homeowners, let me back up. I have commercial fruit growers that get really mad at me because I go out and do these types of presentations and encourage homeowners to grow fruit, because it seems like a lot of times homeowners will put trees in and they forget about them, and they get a lot of insect or diseases, problems, and they don't take care of it. And those trees or those insects don't remember that, oh, I'm not supposed to cross this property boundary and go into this orchard. Okay? And so I encourage you, if you're going to put fruit trees in, to be a responsible homeowner and take control of your insects or diseases. Okay? As I mentioned, codling moth and that, typically here in Utah we'll have 2, if not 3 generations. And so if you can suppress that first generation, you're going to have less of a second and third generation in that year. Okay? Know when to spray based upon the calendar. So that's where that pest advisory can come in and tell you exactly when you need to be spraying or putting out some sort of a control method there. Just because you take the Master Gardener class doesn't exempt you from the label. You remember the label is the law, okay? So follow it, read and follow it. Here's a list of some of the reduced risk organic type options that are out there. Anybody familiar with Japanese apple bags or seen those before? Okay, this is kind of what they look like. You actually go take this little bag and you put those over each individual fruit and leave it on all summer long, and then you'll pull them off after the pressure is passed. So fall time of the year, you come in and you remove the bags and you've got some pretty cool apples that are, you got some red and yellow apples on the same tree. And these will actually take on color fairly quickly. Okay. Virusoft or Sidex is actually a codling moth virus that you can use for codling moth control on apples and pears. It's kind of pricey. Last time I checked for a quart of it was about $380. Okay, but you don't use a lot of it, so if you've got neighbors that want to use it, go together and buy some. Trunk banding is you can take some cardboard, roll it up into a roll, stick it on the trunk, and then the insects will use that to pupate down in here, and then you just come by periodically and throw those into the garbage can. Success and Trust, and there's some other ones that are OMRI certified that you can use for organic production. The horticultural oil as well. So there are some good things. These are all listed into that advisory that's sent out, along with insecticides that if you want to use more of the commercial type things, you can use those. Uniform coverage. So you've got that apple that's golf ball size today. 2 weeks later, it's going to be much larger, and so you're going to want to make sure you get that another cover spray on there when it tells you to, according to the label. Thin properly. If I leave both of these, typically what will happen is the collie moth will lay it right here and it ruins both the apples. So just get rid of that one. You can kind of see here and here some collie moth that are already in there. Some of the typical diseases, with coronium blight or shot hole, we typically will see that on apricots. Sometimes we'll see it on peaches if we've got enough of it in the orchard. Fire blight, last year we saw quite a bit of that flare up on apples and pears. Even your ornamental pear trees, and that we see it in. And then some powdery mildew. This is, if you're not familiar with fire blight, that's what fire blight looks like early on in the season. This is what coronium blight looks like on peaches and apricots there. Now for a homeowner, you might look at that and say, that's fine, I don't really care. But if you're a commercial person, are going to be taking that to a farmer's market, we like clean fruit. We don't want to have damage done to it. So you might look at that. Here's some of the publications. So there's codling moth. There's the one on peach twig borer, greater peach tree borer, aphid. So really good sources of information out there. Here's the website where you can go to sign up for the pest advisory. If you want to look and see how the insects are development, you can go out to this one right here. And if you've got questions, give the extension office a call. Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed the class. Thank you. You're welcome.